I'm Natalie, and at 35, I thought I had my life figured out. As an interior designer, I poured my heart and soul into transforming spaces. My small apartment was my sanctuary, a place where I could retreat from the world and just be myself. Losing my parents early on wasn't easy, but it taught me to be self-reliant. I got used to the quiet evenings, the solitude that comes with being alone. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't some hermit hiding from the world. I had friends, colleagues, and a career I loved. But serious relationships? They weren't on my radar. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I flopped onto my couch and started scrolling through my social media. It was a mindless habit, one that helped me unwind. That's when I saw the message. "Hey there, Natalie. Your designs are incredible. Have you ever thought about doing commercial spaces?" I paused, my thumb hovering over the screen. The profile picture showed a handsome guy with a warm smile. Jake Thompson, 38, business owner. I hesitated for a moment before replying. "Thanks, Jake. I've done a few commercial projects, but I mostly focus on residential spaces. Why do you ask?" And just like that, we started chatting. At first, it was all business. He owned a small transportation company and was thinking about revamping his office. But as the days went by, our conversations drifted to other topics. Movies, books, our favorite spots in the city. It was easy, effortless. A week into our chats, Jake threw me a curveball. "Natalie, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" No pressure, just thought it'd be nice to meet in person. I stared at the message, my heart doing a little flip. Sure, why not? There's a great little cafe near my office. How about Saturday at 2? Saturday rolled around, and I found myself standing in front of my closet, suddenly aware of how much of my wardrobe consisted of work clothes. I settled on a casual sundress, something that said I made an effort, but I'm not trying too hard. The cafe was buzzing when I arrived. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on Jake. He was even more handsome in person, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He stood up when he saw me, waving me over. "Natalie, it's great to finally meet you," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "Likewise," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "I hope you haven't been waiting long." And just like that, we fell into conversation. Jake was attentive, asking thoughtful questions about my work. He told me about his transportation company, the challenges of managing a fleet of trucks and drivers. Time flew by, and before I knew it, we'd been talking for hours. As we left the cafe, Jake turned to me. "I had a great time, Natalie. Would you like to do this again sometime?" I found myself nodding before I even realized it. "Yeah, I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, Jake and I started seeing each other regularly. Our coffee dates turned into dinners, and soon we were spending most of our free time together. There was something about Jake that made me feel at ease. He was confident without being arrogant, smart without being condescending. As the months passed, our relationship deepened. Jake introduced me to his mother, Sarah, a kind woman in her 60s who had recently suffered a stroke. She lived with Jake in a modest house on the outskirts of town. "Mom, this is Natalie," Jake said, his arm around my waist. Sarah's face lit up. "Oh, Jake's told me so much about you. Come in, come in." Despite her condition, Sarah was warm and welcoming. We spent the afternoon chatting, and I found myself growing fond of her. It was clear that Jake was devoted to his mother, and seeing this softer side of him made me fall for him even more. As we were leaving, Sarah pulled me aside. "You're good for him, Natalie. I haven't seen Jake this happy in years." Her words stayed with me, warming my heart. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges. Jake's work often kept him busy, and there were times when I felt like I was competing with his company for attention. But he always made time for me, surprising me with lunch dates or leaving sweet notes in my apartment. A year flew by in a whirlwind of love and laughter. On our anniversary, Jake took me to the same cafe where we had our first date. As we finished our meal, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Natalie," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "This past year has been the best of my life. You brought so much joy and love into my world. I can't imagine my life without you." My breath caught in my throat as he got down on one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded, unable to speak. Jake slipped the ring onto my finger, and the cafe erupted in applause. As we left, hand in hand, I couldn't stop staring at the ring. It was beautiful, but more than that, it represented a future I never thought I'd have. We decided to have a small wedding, just close friends and family. Sarah was overjoyed, insisting on helping with the planning, despite her health issues. The day of the wedding was perfect. As I walked down the aisle, seeing Jake's face light up, I knew I had made the right decision. We exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life threw our way. At the reception, Sarah pulled me aside, her eyes glistening with tears. "Welcome to the family, dear," she said, hugging me tightly. After the wedding, Jake and I decided to move into Sarah's house. It made sense, she needed care, and the house was spacious enough for all of us. I rented out my apartment, packing up my life into cardboard boxes, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The first few months of marriage were blissful. Jake was attentive and loving, always ready with a kiss or a kind word. Sarah and I grew closer, bonding over our shared love of gardening and cooking. It felt like I had gained not just a husband, but a mother as well. Determined to help Sarah recover from her stroke, I hired a massage therapist and a therapeutic gymnastics coach. The improvements were slow, but steady. Within a few months, Sarah was walking normally, even starting to putter around in the garden and cook meals. As for Jake and me, we were in no rush to have children. We both wanted to focus on our careers and enjoy our time together. But as our first wedding anniversary approached, I noticed a subtle shift in Jake's behavior. He started staying late at work more often, citing issues with drivers or last-minute client requests. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, running a business wasn't easy, and I often worked late hours myself. One Saturday morning, as I was enjoying my coffee and a good book, Jake announced he had to go into the office. "On a weekend?" I asked, surprised. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, some paperwork I need to catch up on. Don't wait up for me, okay?" As he left, I felt a twinge of unease. But I pushed it aside, focusing instead on my plans for the day. It was Sarah who first voiced her concerns. We were in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when she broached the subject. "Natalie, dear," she began, her voice hesitant. "Have you noticed Jake's been working a lot lately? You should keep an eye on him, you know. Don't let him take you for granted." I turned to her, surprised. "What do you mean?" She sighed, looking suddenly older. "Men, sometimes they get restless. They forget what they have at home." Her words sent a chill through me. Was she speaking from experience? I wanted to ask, but something in her expression held me back. That night, as I lay in bed waiting for Jake to come home, Sarah's words echoed in my mind. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider the possibility that something might be wrong. When Jake finally crawled into bed in the early hours of the morning, I pretended to be asleep. He smelled of cigarette smoke and, was that perfume? My stomach churned, but I kept my eyes closed, my breathing steady. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't live with this uncertainty, this growing doubt. I needed to know the truth, whatever it might be. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and searched for private investigators in our area. It felt wrong, a betrayal of trust, but the alternative, living with this gnawing suspicion, seemed worse. I found a highly rated agency and made an appointment for later that week. As I hung up, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Soon, I told myself, I would have answers. Whether I would like those answers was another matter entirely. The detective's office was small and cluttered, with files stacked haphazardly on every surface. The detective himself, a grizzled man in his 50s, introduced himself as Mike. I laid out everything: the late nights, the weekend work, the subtle changes in Jake's behavior. As I spoke, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. It felt good to voice my fears, to have someone listen without judgment. "All right," Mike said when I finished. "Here's what we'll do. We'll track his movements for a few weeks, see if we can establish a pattern. If he's up to something, we'll find out." 3 weeks later, my phone rang. It was Mike. "Mrs. Thompson, I think you should come to my office. I have some information for you." The drive to his office was a blur. My hand shook as I parked, and I had to take a moment to compose myself before going in. Mike was waiting for me, a thick file on his desk. His expression was grim. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson," he began, and my heart sank. "But your suspicions were correct. Your husband has been unfaithful." He pushed the file towards me. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside were photos, text messages, hotel receipts. Evidence of not one affair, but several. Jake had been seeing multiple women, juggling them with what appeared to be a carefully planned schedule. "He's been meeting them at various hotels," Mike explained gently. "Always on different days of the week. It seems he's been doing this for quite some time." I stared at the photos, unable to process what I was seeing. There was Jake, my Jake, with his arm around a blonde woman I'd never seen before. Another showed him kissing a redhead outside a restaurant. My stomach churned. I left Mike's office in a daze, the file clutched to my chest. As I drove home, tears blurred my vision. How could Jake do this to me? To us? What about our vows, our promises? When I pulled into our driveway, I saw that Jake's car wasn't there. Of course not. It was Thursday, according to Mike's report. That was his night with the blonde. Sarah was in the living room when I came in. One look at my face, and she knew. "Oh, Natalie," she said softly. "What happened?" I couldn't hold it in anymore. I collapsed onto the couch next to her and told her everything, my suspicions, hiring the detective, what I'd learned. Sarah reached out, gently taking the file from my hands and setting it aside. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of concern and determination, met mine. "You need to rest, dear. You can't make any decisions in this state. A clear mind is what you need now." I nodded numbly, allowing her to guide me to my feet and towards the stairs. As I climbed each step, I felt as though I was moving through molasses, my body heavy with the burden of my newfound knowledge. "We'll talk more tomorrow," Sarah promised as she saw me to my room. "Try to get some sleep." Sleep, however, proved elusive. I tossed and turned all night, my mind replaying every moment of my marriage, searching for clues I might have missed. When dawn finally broke, I gave up on rest and got ready for work. Work was a blur. I moved through the day on autopilot, my colleagues' concerned glances bouncing off the protective shell I'd built around myself. As the office emptied out for the evening, I remained at my desk, unable to face the thought of going home. It was dark by the time I finally left, the streets quiet as I made my way back to the house. As I turned onto our street, a strange sight greeted me. The garage door was wide open, and I could hear the rumble of an engine. Suddenly, Sarah came tearing out of the garage in Jake's pickup truck, the tires screeching as she swerved onto the street. My heart leapt into my throat as she barreled towards me, but at the last moment, she slammed on the brakes. "Natalie," she shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. "Get in the car. Now." Bewildered and alarmed by the wild look in her eyes, I obeyed without question, scrambling into the passenger seat. No sooner had I closed the door than Sarah floored the accelerator, the truck lurching forward with a roar. In the rearview mirror, I saw Jake burst out of the house, his face contorted with rage. He ran after us, shouting and cursing, but Sarah didn't slow down. We tore down the street, leaving him behind. I turned to Sarah, my heart pounding. "What's going on?" I demanded, but the words died in my throat when I saw her expression. She looked terrified, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. We drove in tense silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only about 30 minutes. I didn't dare speak, afraid of breaking Sarah's concentration as she navigated the darkening roads. Finally, Sarah pulled into the parking lot of a roadside diner. She scanned the area carefully before killing the engine, her body still tense. "Come on," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We need to talk." Inside the diner, we slid into a booth in the far corner. Sarah ordered coffee for both of us, her eyes constantly darting to the door. When the waitress left, Sarah leaned across the table, speaking in a hushed, frantic whisper. "Natalie, listen to me carefully. We're in danger. An hour ago, I overheard Jake on the phone. He was talking about getting rid of us, Natalie. Both of us." I stared at her in shock, my mind reeling from her words. The idea that Jake could be planning to get rid of us seemed too outlandish to be true. Sarah must have sensed my disbelief, because her expression shifted from fear to determination. "You don't believe me," she said, not as a question, but a statement. Without waiting for my response, she reached into her purse and pulled out Jake's phone. "I found this in his car when I was leaving. Look for yourself." Together, Sarah and I huddled over the small screen, scrolling through Jake's messages. My heart sank as we came across a conversation with someone labeled NH Director. As we read, the truth of Sarah's words became clearer. Jake wasn't planning to kill us, but his intentions were far from innocent. He was in talks with the director of a state nursing home, discussing ways to have Sarah declared incapacitated and admitted against her will. "Oh my God," I whispered, quickly searching for reviews of the nursing home. What I found made my blood run cold. Neglect, abuse, unsanitary conditions, the stories were nightmarish. I looked up at Sarah, who seemed relieved. But as I read her some of the worst accounts, Sarah's relief turned to anger. "That's not living," she spat. "It's a slow death. It might as well be murder." But Jake's betrayal didn't end there. As we continued to scroll, we found messages to multiple women, his mistresses. The sheer number was staggering, but what hurt the most were his words about me. "Once Mom's out of the way, I'll leave Natalie," one message read. "I'm tired of playing house. I want my freedom." I felt sick, but forced myself to keep reading, copying the messages to my email as evidence. Sarah and I sat in disgusted silence, the weight of Jake's betrayal hanging heavy between us. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have seen this coming," she said. "Jake's father, he cheated on me too. 4 years. He even had another family, 2 kids I didn't know about until it was too late." My jaw dropped. "Sarah, I had no idea." She nodded sadly. I turned a blind eye to it all. I loved him, and I was afraid he'd leave us if I confronted him. I thought, I hoped Jake would be different. That seeing his father's mistakes would make him a better man. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But he's been this way since he was young. Always charming, always with a new girl on his arm. I lost count of how many hearts he broke. When he married you, Natalie, I thought he'd finally grown up. I was so happy." I took a deep breath. "I'm going to divorce him. I can't stay with someone who would do this to us." Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. Then, to my surprise, she began to cry softly. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave me. I can't face this alone." Without hesitation, I moved to her side of the booth, wrapping my arms around her. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. We're family, and we'll get through this together. I promise." As Sarah and I sat in the diner booth, emotionally drained from our discoveries, I felt a weight pressing on my chest. There was one more piece of news I needed to share, something that complicated our situation even further. "Sarah," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "there's something else you should know." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm pregnant. I found out just this morning at work." I don't know what to do. Sarah's expression hardened, a fierce determination replacing her initial shock. I'll tell you what we're going to do, she said, her voice strong and resolute. We're going to fight back. Jake doesn't get to destroy our lives and walk away unscathed. It's time we took control. We paid for our coffee and headed back to the truck. The drive home was tense, but filled with a sense of purpose. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw Jake's car parked haphazardly, a clear sign of his agitated state. Taking a deep breath, Sarah and I entered the house. Jake was pacing in the living room, his face contorted with rage. As soon as he saw us, he exploded. Mom, what the hell were you thinking, taking off with my truck? And my phone? Have you lost your mind? Before Sarah could respond, I stepped forward, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. I held up the file from the private investigator. Jake, we need to talk. His eyes darted from me to the file, realization dawning on his face. For a moment, he looked panicked, but then his expression smoothed into one of cool indifference. So, he said, his voice eerily calm. What are you going to do about it, Natalie? Divorce me? Yes, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I want a divorce. To my shock, Jake laughed. Come on, Natalie. You're overreacting. So I had a few flings. It doesn't mean anything. You're not enough for me, but we can make this work. You can stay, be a good wife, and I'll be discreet with my extracurricular activities. I felt a surge of anger and disgust. You must be joking. I don't need a Ravella like you in my life, Jake. We're done. Jake's face darkened. He pointed to the door, his voice low and menacing. Fine. Get out. This is my house, and I want you gone. Before I could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. Actually, Jake, this is my house. I own it, and I decide who stays and who goes. She took a deep breath. And I'm telling you to leave. Now. Jake's jaw dropped, disbelief written all over his face. Mom, what are you saying? I'm your son. And Natalie? She's nothing to you. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened. You're wrong, Jake. Natalie is like a daughter to me. She's family. Then, with a pointed look at me, she added. And she's carrying my grandchild. Jake's eyes widened, darting to my stomach. For a moment, hope flickered across his face. You're pregnant? Then I can't leave home. The baby needs a father. I shook my head, my resolve stronger than ever. This child doesn't need a father like you, Jake. We'll be fine without you. Sarah nodded in agreement. You heard her, Jake. It's time for you to go. We'll have the locks changed in the morning. Jake looked from Sarah to me, realization dawning that he had lost this battle. Without another word, he stormed upstairs, presumably to pack his things. As the sound of his angry footsteps faded, I turned to Sarah, overwhelmed by the events of the day. She pulled me into a tight hug, and I felt the tension begin to leave my body. The months following that fateful night were a whirlwind of legal battles, emotional turmoil, and new beginnings. The divorce proceedings were messy, as expected, but with the mountain of evidence we had gathered, Jake didn't stand a chance. I sat in the courtroom, my hand resting protectively over my growing belly, as the judge delivered her verdict. Jake's numerous infidelities, coupled with his attempts to manipulate Sarah's living situation, worked heavily in my favor. The judge's stern voice echoed through the room as she awarded me a substantial compensation package. Mr. Thompson, she said, her eyes boring into Jake, your actions have been reprehensible. This court finds in favor of Mrs. Thompson and orders you to pay compensation for emotional distress. I watched Jake's face contort with anger and disbelief. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the man I thought I had married. But as I caught Sarah's supportive gaze from the gallery, I knew we had made the right decision. After the court proceedings, Sarah and I sat in her kitchen, our kitchen now, sipping tea and processing the day's events. I've made some changes to my will, Sarah said suddenly, sliding a document across the table to me. I skimmed the paper, my eyes widening as I realized what I was reading. Sarah, you can't. This is too much. She reached out, clasping my hand in hers. Natalie, you and that baby are my family now. Jake, he made his choices. I've disinherited him. The house, my savings, they're yours and my grandson's now. As my due date approached, Sarah and I spent our evenings preparing the nursery. One night, as we folded tiny onesies and arranged stuffed animals, Sarah turned to me with a serious expression. Natalie, she said, her voice soft but determined, I want you to know that we're going to raise this boy right. He's going to grow up to be a man who respects women, who understands the value of loyalty and honesty. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. You're right. He won't have his father around, but maybe that's for the best. He won't have to see that negative example. Sarah's eyes misted over. I made mistakes with Jake. I let him see his father's behavior and didn't do enough to counteract it. But this time it'll be different. This little boy will grow up surrounded by strong women who won't tolerate disrespect or infidelity.
Hi, I'm Sylvia. Looking back at my early years, I remember a childhood filled with love and laughter, thanks to my amazing parents. We weren't wealthy, and we didn't live in a fancy neighborhood, but we had each other, and that was more than enough. My sister Rachel and I were inseparable, always getting into mischief together. Our parents just laughed it off, saying kids needed to explore the world around them. But everything changed when I was 8. One rainy night, my parents were driving home from work when a truck skated on the slick road and crashed into their car. They died instantly. At first, Rachel and I didn't understand why they never came home that night. It was our Aunt Melissa who broke the news to us. I remember her exact words. Your parents had a terrible accident, Burls. They're gone. In the days that followed, Melissa made a decision that would change everything. She took in Rachel, saying she could only handle one child. Rachel was quiet, the kind of kid who could sit in a corner and read for hours. Me, I was too much like my parents, vibrant and always on the go. Melissa said I was too much for her to handle. I'm sorry, Sylvia, but you'll have to go somewhere else, somewhere more suited to energetic kids, she told me, barely hiding her disapproval. I couldn't understand. Weren't we both her nieces? Why was I the one left out? I was sent to an orphanage, a place that still haunts me with its antiseptic smell and cold, unfeeling walls. I felt abandoned, like a throwaway child, unwanted even by my own family. But fate had other plans. The Smiths, friends of my parents, heard about what had happened and came for me like angels in disguise. They didn't see the troublesome child. They saw a girl who had just lost everything. Why wouldn't we want you, Sylvia? Mrs. Smith said gently as they signed the adoption papers. You're going to be our daughter now, and we're going to make sure you have everything you need. Moving to a new city with the Smiths felt like stepping into a different world. They loved me as their own, never once making me feel like an outsider. They supported me through school, cheered me on at soccer games, and were there for every high and low. As I adjusted to my new life, I couldn't help but wonder about Rachel. How was she doing? Was Melissa kind to her? Did she miss me like I missed her? Life moved on, and I grew up in a home filled with love and acceptance, slowly healing from the wounds of my past. That's how my journey began, in a loving home that chose me when my own family turned me away. Hey Sylvia, you're awfully quiet today. What's on your mind? Mrs. Smith asked, looking concerned as she handed me a cup of coffee across the breakfast table. It's nothing really, I said, my voice trailing off. I had found a box of old letters in the attic, letters that weren't meant for me but had told me so much. Sylvia, whatever it is, you can tell us. We're here for you, Mr. Smith chimed in, his expression soft and inviting. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was time to share. I found letters from Aunt Melissa to my parents. I began, my voice trembling. She talked about taking in Rachel but not me. She said I was too much like my parents, too wild to fit into her perfect family. The room went silent. Mrs. Smith reached over, squeezing my hand. Oh, Sylvia, that must have been so hard to read, she said softly. It was, I admitted, but it explains a lot. Why she never came to see me, Not even once. I guess I just wasn't the right fit. Sylvia, remember, we chose you because you fit perfectly with us, not because you needed to fit into some mold, Mr. Smith said firmly. I nodded, feeling the weight of years of confusion starting to lift. I know, and I'm grateful every day, but it still hurts, to be rejected because of who I am. We understand, sweetheart, but remember, you're not that little girl anymore. You're a strong young woman who has overcome so much, Mrs. Smith said, smiling warmly. Encouraged, I continued, You're right, and I'm going to use this. I'm going to write my thesis on family dynamics and acceptance. Maybe I can help others understand and deal with similar situations. That sounds like a wonderful idea. We're so proud of you, Mr. Smith said, his voice filled with pride. The rest of my college years flew by as I immersed myself in studies and part-time work, fueled by a desire to prove that being too much could actually mean having a lot to offer. My thesis on family acceptance was well received, opening doors to graduate studies and a promising career in social work. Each success felt like a silent nod to Melissa, showing that her rejection didn't define me but propelled me forward. My relationship with my adoptive parents grew stronger, and I found solace in knowing I was loved unconditionally. As my career took off, I often reflected on those difficult revelations and used them to drive my passion for helping others. Each family I helped reconcile felt like healing a little part of myself that had been broken. Through it all, I kept moving forward, determined to live a life full of love and acceptance, proving that sometimes being too much is just enough. One crisp afternoon, as I was settling into my office, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello, Sylvia speaking. This is Nurse Thompson from Greenwood Care Facility. I'm calling about your aunt, Melissa. She's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and her condition has deteriorated. Hearing Melissa's name after so long jolted me. I'm sorry to hear that, but there must be some mistake. Melissa and I haven't been in contact for years. I understand, Sylvia, but before her memory faded, she insisted we reach out to you if things worsened. Her family, they haven't visited in months. I paused, the weight of her words sinking in. I see. What exactly are you asking of me? Just a visit, perhaps. It might comfort her, even in her current state. I mulled it over, feeling an old wound reopen. Later at home, I turned to Jared, my fiancé. We sat on our porch, watching the sunset. Melissa's in a nursing home with Alzheimer's. They want me to visit her, I explained, unsure of my feelings. Sylvia, you don't owe her anything. Remember, she made her choices, Jared said, his voice steady. I know, but it's complicated. Part of me feels like I should do something. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Just think about what's best for you. The next day, I sought advice from Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Sylvia, it's okay to protect yourself, Mrs. Smith said gently. You have your own life and your own family now. Melissa made her bed, Mr. Smith added. It's not your responsibility to fix it. Their words resonated with me, but I still needed more clarity. I decided to call Rachel, hoping to understand her absence from Melissa's life. Sylvia, I stayed away on purpose, Rachel confessed. Living with her, even as a favored child, was suffocating. When I left, I decided it was for good. Did you know about her condition? I asked. I did, but I chose peace, Sylvia. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary for my sanity. Rachel's admission hit me hard. We had both found our escape, our way to breathe away from Melissa's controlling shadow. After reflecting on my conversations, I made my decision. I called Nurse Thompson back. I've given it a lot of thought, Nurse Thompson, I said, my voice steady. I'm sorry, but I can't visit Melissa. It's a part of my past that I can't revisit. Please understand. I do, Sylvia. Thank you for considering it. We'll respect your decision. Hanging up, a mix of relief and sadness washed over me. Jared wrapped me in his arms, his support unwavering. You made the right choice for you, Sylvia, he assured me. Leaning into his embrace, I felt the strength of his support. Choosing to move forward on my own terms was perhaps the hardest, yet most freeing, decision I had made. Sitting across from Rachel at the cozy little cafe we'd chosen for our meeting, I felt a swirl of emotions, nerves, anticipation, hope. It had been years since we'd sat down together, just the two of us. Sisters trying to bridge the gap that time and circumstances had stretched wide. As we sipped our coffee, Rachel was the first to break the silence. I've missed this, Sylvia. I've missed you. I've missed you too, I replied, the familiar pain of our separation easing a bit with her words. I'm sorry we let so much time pass. We were both dealing with a lot, but I'm glad we're here now, she said, her smile tentative but genuine. The conversation shifted toward our aunt, and I hesitated before speaking. I heard about Melissa's condition. It must have been tough to hear after all these years. Rachel's expression clouded. Yeah, it brought up a lot of old feelings. But I realized that staying away was necessary for my own healing. She wanted to shape me into something I wasn't, and when I couldn't fit into that mold, it hurt a lot. I nodded, understanding her more than ever. She did the same to me in a different way. Rejected me because I was too much like mom and dad, too energetic, too lively. It's ironic, Rachel mused. She pushed us away trying to mold us, and now she's the one left alone. Yeah, and I've decided not to visit her, I said softly. It's hard, but it's what I need to do to protect my peace. I hope that's okay. Rachel reached across the table, squeezing my hand. It's more than okay, Sylvia. I support your decision. We both need to do what's best for us, not just what's expected. Our conversation drifted through memories of our childhood, the good and the bad, as we pieced together a clearer picture of our shared past. It was therapeutic, talking openly about the hurt and healing, about the life Melissa tried to dictate and the lives we reclaimed for ourselves. We have each other, Sylvia, Rachel said as we prepared to leave. That's what matters. Let's not let anyone come between us again. I smiled, feeling a profound sense of relief and reconnection. Agreed. It's us against the world, right? Right, Rachel echoed with a laugh. As we hugged goodbye, I felt lighter than I had in years, fortified by the renewed bond with my sister. Driving home, I reflected on our journey, the pain inflicted by Melissa, our paths of personal growth, and our decision to maintain our distance from her. It wasn't about holding grudges. It was about choosing our well-being and focusing on a future that belonged to us, not dictated by the shadows of the past. That night, as I shared everything with Jared, his steadfast support and understanding underscored the incredible strength I'd gained, not just from my chosen family, but also from reconnecting with Rachel. Together, we were moving forward, healing from our scars, and building lives filled with love and purpose. The morning Melissa passed away, there was a chill in the air, not from the weather, but from the finality of the news. Rachel called me early, her voice steady yet tinged with a whisper of old grief. It's over, Sylvia. Melissa is gone. As I processed her words, a tangle of relief and sorrow twisted inside me. Are you okay? I asked, knowing the complexity of her emotions. I think so. It's strange, isn't it? To feel relief that it's finally over, Rachel replied. It is, but it's also okay. We've been carrying this burden for too long, I said, feeling the truth of my words deeply. We decided to attend the funeral together, not for Melissa, but for ourselves, to put to rest the last remnants of our painful past. Standing by her grave, the small gathering was stark, a testament to the solitary life she had led in her final years. There were no eulogies filled with warmth, only the cold recitation of her life and passing. As the pastor concluded his prayers, Rachel squeezed my hand, a silent pact between us. We were there to say goodbye, not just to Melissa, but to the shadow she had cast over our lives. Walking away from the cemetery, I felt a chapter closing, one that had lingered open far too long. In the weeks that followed, life moved swiftly toward a much happier occasion, my wedding. As I stood in the bridal suite preparing to walk down the aisle, I was surrounded by laughter and the bustling energy of my bridesmaids. Rachel was there, radiant and supportive, no longer just my sister but my best friend. You look beautiful, Sylvia, she whispered, adjusting the veil on my hair. Thanks to you. I couldn't have gotten here without your support, I replied, our eyes meeting in the mirror, a shared history reflecting back at us. The ceremony was everything I had dreamed of and more. Jared stood at the altar, his eyes brimming with emotion as I walked toward him. The church was filled with our friends and family, every face a reminder of the love and support that had guided me here. As Jared and I exchanged our vows, promising to build a future together based on love and mutual respect, I felt the weight of the past truly lift. We were moving forward, but we were doing so on our terms, our lives defined not by the shadows of what had been but by the light of what could be. The reception was a blur of music, dancing, and laughter. Mr. and Mrs. Smith danced every dance, their faces alight with joy. Rachel gave a toast that brought everyone to tears, not just for its words of love, but for the journey it recounted, one of healing and rediscovery. As the night drew to a close, Jared and I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The stars were out, a tapestry of light against the dark sky. "We did it," I said, my head resting against his shoulder. "We did," he agreed, kissing the top of my head. "Here's to new beginnings, to love, and to a future we create together." As we stood there, the night whispered around us, promising years of happiness to come, built on the foundation of choices made with courage and the strength to let go of the past. The air was no longer heavy with loss but light with the promise of the life we were ready to live. Now that our story has reached its conclusion, I have a question for you all. Sylvia and Rachel made the choice to attend Melissa's funeral not out of obligation but to seek closure on their own terms. Do you think attending the funeral of someone who hurt you was necessary for healing, or is it better to find peace from a distance? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Hi, I'm Lisa. For years, I've felt overshadowed by someone I could never seem to please, my mother-in-law, Brenda. Every day followed the same routine. I'd be up before dawn, moving silently to avoid her sharp critiques. By 6 a.m., I was already in the kitchen, the cold morning air mixing with the scent of brewing coffee. As the coffee dripped, I prepared breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and Brenda's favorite, crispy bacon. The sizzling sound seemed to summon her from her room, like it was the only alarm she ever responded to. "Make sure the bacon's crispy, Lisa. And don't burn the toast like last time," came Brenda's voice from the doorway, icy and sharp. "Of course, Brenda, just the way you like it," I replied, keeping my voice steady, hoping to avoid an early clash. As I plated her breakfast, I could feel her eyes scrutinizing every move, as if I were walking on fragile glass. The slightest misstep would shatter the peace. The morning light barely seeped through the curtains when her voice cut through the stillness. "I want this house spotless today, Lisa. Start with making me a decent cup of coffee, not like yesterday's mess." Taking a deep breath, I measured the coffee grounds with extra care, hoping to avoid another complaint. The coffee maker hummed softly, a contrast to the tense atmosphere. I busied myself cleaning, dusting, vacuuming, ensuring everything was in order, even though I knew she would find fault anyway. The moment of truth came when I brought Brenda her coffee. She sat in her usual chair, watching me like a hawk. "Here you go. I made it stronger today," I said, offering a cautious smile. She took a sip, her face twisting in disgust. "This is awful. How hard is it to make a simple cup of coffee? Are you trying to irritate me on purpose?" she snapped. "No, Brenda. Before I could explain, she shot up from her chair, still holding the cup. "You're useless, Lisa. Absolutely useless." Her voice rose in fury as she stepped closer, grabbing my arm with a painful grip. "Please, Brenda, you're hurting me," I begged, my voice trembling. "Good. Maybe that'll teach you to do better." And with that, she did something she had never done before. She yanked my hair and shoved me back. I stumbled, stunned by the sharp pain and the few strands of hair that came away in her hand. I stood there frozen as tears welled in my eyes, not just from the physical pain, but from the realization of how far she was willing to go. Brenda tossed the coffee cup into the sink with a loud clatter. "Clean that up, and make the coffee again," she demanded before sitting back down. My mind raced. This couldn't continue. As soon as Brenda returned to her chair, I slipped out of the room, my hands shaking as I reached for my phone. With a deep breath, I dialed John's number. The phone rang, each tone heavy with the weight of what I was about to do. "John, it's me," I whispered. "I need to tell you what just happened." "Brenda," she attacked me. I can't live like this anymore." His voice came through, full of concern. "Lisa, what happened? Are you okay?" Tears streamed down my face as I spoke. She pulled my hair, shoved me. "I'm really scared. I don't know what to do." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'm so sorry, Lisa. I had no idea it was this bad. I'm coming home right now. We'll figure this out together. Just hang in there, okay?" As I hung up the phone, a newfound resolve settled over me. Today was the day everything changed. I couldn't live under Brenda's control any longer. When John arrived, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Without thinking, I ran into his arms, and he held me tight, speechless for a moment. "I'm so sorry, Lisa. I'm in shock that things escalated this far," he said softly. "But I'm glad you spoke up. Now, we need to find a way to fix this." Tears flowed down my face, and I felt so weak, but John's words, and just his presence, calmed me. That night was heavy with the weight of the decision we had made. But the next morning felt different, as though the air was lighter with the promise of change. When I came downstairs, John was already on the phone, speaking in a low, serious tone. "Yes, I understand the options, but we need something that allows for some independence too. That's crucial." He glanced up at me and gave a small, reassuring smile before finishing his call. Once he hung up, he motioned for me to come over. "I've been looking into care facilities that offer independent living arrangements," he said. "I want to make sure we find a place where Mom can still feel like she has her own space, but where we know she's safe and well taken care of." I nodded, grateful for his thoughtfulness in such a difficult situation. "That sounds like a good balance, John. Have you talked to her about it yet?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm about to. Wish me luck." We found Brenda sitting in the living room, her posture still holding a hint of defiance, though her demeanor was more subdued. John sat across from her, his expression serious but kind. "Mom, we need to talk about what's next. I found a few places that I think would suit you. They're nice, comfortable, and you have your own apartment." Brenda's face hardened. "So you're sending me away now, after one mistake?" John remained calm. "It's not about sending you away, Mom. It's about finding a solution that keeps everyone safe and healthy. This isn't just about yesterday. It's about a pattern that we can't ignore anymore." Brenda's voice rose, her anger simmering. "I don't mean to be managed, John. I'm not a child." "This isn't about treating you like a child," John said gently. "It's about making sure Lisa feels safe and that you have the support you need as you get older." Brenda turned her gaze away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never thought it would come to this. It's not an easy decision," John admitted, "but I believe it's the right one. The place I found has great reviews and the people seem really nice. You can come visit anytime, or we'll visit you whenever you want." After a long pause, Brenda finally nodded, her voice quiet. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's for the best." "I know this is hard," John continued, "but I think it will be good for you. You won't have to worry about the house, and there are plenty of activities to keep you busy." Brenda let out a deep, resigned sigh. "All right, John. I'll try it, for you, but I'm not making any promises." John gave her a gentle smile. "That's all I'm asking, Mom." As we left the room, John squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the difficult but necessary decision we had made. The atmosphere felt permanently changed. It felt like we were finally moving toward something healthier, something better. The morning sun poured into the kitchen, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table where John and I sat, enjoying the quiet that had once seemed so elusive. He reached across the table, his hand finding mine. "Can you believe how peaceful it is?" John mused, a smile spreading across his face. I squeezed his hand, the tranquility of the moment washing over me. "It's like we're finally breathing again." I didn't realize how much tension I was holding onto until now. He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I'm sorry it took so long to make things right. I should have seen it sooner." "It's not your fault, John. We both hoped things would get better. I'm just so grateful for how you stood by me and took action when it mattered." I replied, my voice filled with appreciation. John's expression softened. "I'll always be here for you, Lisa. I promised that on our wedding day, and I mean to keep that promise. No one should make you feel unsafe, especially not in your own home." The coffee machine beeped, signaling that our brew was ready. As I stood to pour us each a cup, I reflected on how far we'd come, from feeling overwhelmed and undervalued to this moment of mutual respect and support. "You know, John, it's strange how things turn out. I feel stronger now, more confident in standing up for myself. That's all I've ever wanted, for you to be happy and strong." John replied, watching me with eyes full of love. As we sipped our coffee, we talked about plans for the future. Simple things like redecorating the living room or planting a small garden in the backyard. Every word and laugh felt like a building block in the new foundation of our relationship, one no longer shadowed by Brenda's oppressive presence. "I've been thinking a lot about karma lately," I said, setting down my cup. John raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What brought that on?" "Just seeing how everything unfolded. Brenda made her choices, and those choices led her to a new place. One that might actually be better for her in the long run. It's not about punishment, but more about the natural balance of things. I explained, my thoughts clear and firm. It's comforting to think there's some kind of balance, that by standing up for yourself, you're not just causing conflict but restoring that balance, John said thoughtfully. I smiled, the early rays of sunlight catching the edges of my hair. Exactly. And now we get to focus on building something positive here, just the two of us. John reached for my hand again, his touch reassuring. Here's to new beginnings, to peace, and to us growing stronger together. As we sat there, the world outside slowly waking up, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of peace. The journey had been hard, fraught with challenges and tears, but it had led to this new dawn filled with promise and newfound strength. And in that quiet light, I finally understood. Standing up for yourself is sometimes the most powerful statement you can make. As our story comes to a close, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think moving Brenda to a care facility was the right decision? Or do you feel John and Lisa should have handled things differently? Please share your opinions in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe. Hey there, I'm Opilia. I'm a 32-year-old freelance graphic designer, and lately my business has been on fire. I've been riding high on the success and couldn't be more thrilled with how my career is shaping up. Or so I thought. I've been married to Eric for 5 years now. He's a charming real estate agent, always saying the right thing. We met at a friend's barbecue, and sparks flew from the start. His family welcomed me with open arms, especially his dad, George. I thought I'd hit the in-law jackpot. Opilia, darling, you're the daughter I never had, George would say, patting my hand at family dinners. I'd beam with pride, feeling like I truly belonged. My home office is my sanctuary, the place where all the magic happens. I've poured my heart into creating it, from the ergonomic chair to the state-of-the-art computer setup. Your office is amazing, babe, Eric would say, leaning against the doorframe. You've really outdone yourself. I'd smile, feeling on top of the world. But lately, there's been an odd edge to his compliments, as if he's forcing the words out. My best friend, Lydia, noticed it too. Over coffee last week, she asked, "Is everything okay with Eric? He seemed a bit off at your birthday party." I shrugged it off, saying, "Oh, he's just stressed about work, you know how it is." But truthfully, I noticed things too. Little comments, the way his jaw tightens when I talk about a successful project, the subtle eye roll when I mention a new client. Eric's sister, Melissa, has always been supportive, but lately she's been checking in more often. "How are things with you and Eric?" she'd ask, her voice full of concern. I'd assure her everything was fine, but deep down, I was starting to wonder. Then there's George. He's always been a bit intense, but recently, I've caught him watching me with a calculating look. "You know, Pilia," he said at our last family dinner, "it's admirable how you've built your business. But don't you think it's time to slow down? Maybe start thinking about a family?" I laughed it off, but the comment stuck with me. Why would I need to slow down? My business is thriving, and Eric and I had agreed we weren't ready for kids yet, or at least I thought we had. As I sit here in my office, staring at the screen, I can't shake the feeling that something's not right. The perfect life I thought I had is starting to feel like an illusion, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep pretending everything's okay. But hey, that's life, right? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, bam, the rug gets pulled out from under you. Stay tuned because this story is just getting started. I couldn't believe my ears. There I was, standing frozen in the hallway, listening to my husband and father-in-law plotting to destroy everything I'd worked so hard for. "Dad, we need to do something about Opilia's office." Eric's voice drifted from the living room. "Her success, it's too much." George's reply made my blood run cold. "Don't worry, son. I've got a plan. We'll stage a little accident. A burst pipe maybe. Water damage can be so destructive." I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. My mind raced, replaying every interaction I had with them over the past few months. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The time Eric accidentally spilled coffee on my laptop. The way George always seemed to interrupt during important client calls. It wasn't just coincidence or bad luck. It was deliberate. I stumbled back to my office, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I dialed Lydia's number. Lydia, I need you. Can you come over? An hour later, we sat in a coffee shop far from my house. I spilled everything. Oh my God, Ophelia, Lydia's eyes were wide with shock. You need to get out of there. I shook my head. I can't just leave. Everything I've worked for is in that house, in that office. Then you need to gather evidence, Lydia said firmly. You can't let them get away with this. She was right, of course. But the thought of going back, of pretending everything was normal, made me sick to my stomach. Remember last Christmas? I said, my voice barely above a whisper, when Eric told everyone at dinner that I was thinking of quitting freelancing to start a family. Lydia nodded. I remember. I never said that. He just made it up. And when I confronted him later, he said he was just helping me save face because my business was struggling. But your business was doing great, Lydia frowned. Exactly. It's like he's been trying to undermine me all along. I didn't want to see it. Lydia reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Listen, my cousin Sarah is a detective. Let me give her a call. She might be able to help. An hour later, Detective Sarah Chen joined us. Her no-nonsense attitude was exactly what I needed. Ophelia, what they're planning is a crime, Sarah said, her dark eyes serious. But we need solid evidence. Are you willing to play along for a bit to get that evidence? I took a deep breath. The thought of going back, of pretending everything was fine, made my skin crawl. But what choice did I have? I'll do it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll get the evidence we need. Sarah nodded approvingly. Good. We'll set up hidden cameras and voice recorders. But be careful. Don't confront them until we have everything. As I left the coffee shop, my mind was spinning. How had my life turned into this nightmare? Beneath the fear and betrayal, though, I felt something stronger. Determination. They thought they could break me and destroy everything I built. Well, they had another thing coming. I straightened my shoulders and headed home. It was time to turn the tables on Eric and George. If they wanted to play games, fine, but they were about to find out that I played to win. The next few weeks were like living in a spy movie. Detective Sarah hooked me up with high-tech gear, tiny cameras and voice recorders I strategically placed around the house. My home office turned into a surveillance hub, and I felt like a secret agent every time I walked in. Hey babe, working late again? Eric would ask, his voice dripping with fake concern. I'd smile sweetly. Just wrapping up a project. Don't wait up. Little did he know I was combing through hours of footage and audio, piecing together their sinister plan. And as it turned out, I uncovered far more than I bargained for. One night, I overheard a phone call that made my stomach twist. Jessica, baby, I'll see you tomorrow. Ophelia thinks I'm at a client meeting. My husband was cheating on me with Jessica, his perky blonde coworker. I wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there, but I knew I had to keep my cool. This was just another piece of evidence in the growing case against him. As I dug deeper, I stumbled upon something even more shocking. George, my oh-so-perfect father-in-law, had a hidden past of fraud and tax evasion. I found old documents and emails pointing to a tangled web of financial deceit that made my head spin. I worked tirelessly, backing up all my files and moving my most valuable equipment to a storage unit. There was no way I was letting them destroy my livelihood. But keeping up the act was taking a toll. Eric began giving me suspicious looks, probably wondering why I wasn't panicking about my so-called upcoming accident. You seem different lately, he remarked one morning over breakfast, his eyes narrowing. I shrugged, trying to stay casual, just focused on work. You know how it is. I needed an ally, someone on the inside. That's when I turned to Melissa, Eric's sister. I'd always liked her, and I had a gut feeling she wasn't on board with her family's toxic behavior. We met at a cafe, far from prying eyes. Melissa, I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound crazy. I told her everything, the plot, the affair, George's shady past. To my relief, Melissa believed me. I always knew Dad was manipulative, but this, she shook her head, clearly disturbed. I'm so sorry, Ophelia. What can I do to help? Together, we formulated a plan. Melissa would play dumb, feeding me information from family gatherings I conveniently couldn't attend. The night before the planned accident, I was a bundle of nerves. I triple-checked the cameras and recorders, making sure everything was in place. You okay, hun? Eric asked, his hand on my shoulder, sending a wave of revulsion through me. You seem tense. I forced a smile. Just a big deadline tomorrow. I'm going to turn in early. As I lay in bed, pretending to sleep, I heard Eric moving around downstairs, probably setting up for tomorrow's flood. Little did he know, I had a few surprises of my own planned. I thought about everything I'd uncovered, the betrayal, the lies, the years of manipulation. Part of me was heartbroken, but an even bigger part was furious. They thought they could break me, destroy everything I built. They were in for a rude awakening. Tomorrow, Eric and George would spring their trap, but I'd be ready. And when the dust settled, they'd realize they'd messed with the wrong woman. As I drifted off to sleep, a small smile played on my lips. Tomorrow was going to be one hell of a day. I woke up early, my heart pounding. Today was the day. I heard Eric leave for work, or so he thought. I knew he and George would be back soon to execute their plan. Sure enough, an hour later, I heard them enter the house. I stayed in my bedroom, watching a live feed from the hidden cameras on my laptop. They were in my office, fiddling with the pipes under the sink. Oops, George said, his voice dripping with mock concern as water started gushing out. Looks like we have a problem here. I waited until the water was ankle deep before making my move. I stormed into the office, feigning shock. What the hell is going on here? Eric spun around, his face a mask of fox worry. Ophelia, thank God you're here. The pipe just burst. I crossed my arms. Cut the crap, Eric. I know exactly what you're doing. Their faces fell as I pulled out my phone, playing a video of them plotting the entire scheme. You've been spying on us? Eric stammered. No, I've been protecting myself from your sick games, I snapped back. George stepped forward, trying to calm the situation. Now, Ophelia, let's not overreact. Overreact? I laughed bitterly. You mean like planning to destroy someone's career? Or maybe cheating on your wife, Eric? Eric's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Save it. I know about Jessica. Just then, Melissa burst in, clutching a folder. I've got it, Ophelia. George's eyes widened. Melissa, what are you doing here? She glared at her father. Doing the right thing for once. Here's all the evidence of your fraudulent business practices, Dad. As if on cue, Detective Chen walked in, flanked by 2 officers. George Thompson, we've been investigating you for months. You're under arrest for fraud and tax evasion. Eric fell to his knees, begging. Ophelia, please, I'm sorry. I'll change, I promise. I looked at him, feeling nothing but disgust. Save your breath, Eric. We're done. I want a divorce. The next few months were a whirlwind. With all the evidence I gathered, my lawyers secured a very favorable divorce settlement. George's arrest made headlines, and his business partners quickly distanced themselves, leading to his financial ruin. Eric, tainted by association with his father's crimes, lost his job. Last I heard, he was working as a cashier at a gas station. 1 year later, I stood on a stage accepting an award for Innovative Small Business of the Year. My design company hadn't just survived, it had thrived. I looked out at the audience, seeing Melissa and Lydia cheering me on. They'd been my rocks through everything. This award, I said into the microphone, is for everyone who's ever been underestimated, manipulated, or held back. Your setbacks don't define you, your resilience does. As applause filled the room, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past year had been tough, but I'd come out stronger. I learned who my true friends were, and more importantly, I learned just how strong I could be. Walking off the stage, I smiled to myself. Eric and George thought they could break me. Instead, they made me unbreakable. And as for me, I was just getting started. The story has ended, but I'd love to know your thoughts. If you discovered your partner was secretly plotting to sabotage your career, would you confront them immediately or gather evidence first? What would you do differently from Ophelia? Share your thoughts in the comments below.